I'll never forget that Christmas Eve. The snow outside was falling like a never-ending curtain. The air was sharp enough to cut through skin. And inside my own house, the place that was supposed to feel like home, I was treated like a stranger. My name is Rachel, and I'm the middle child of 3. My older brother, Chris, was always the golden boy. Straight A's, star athlete, the one who never seemed to make a mistake. My younger sister, Emily, was the baby of the family, spoiled rotten since the day she was born. And then there was me. I wasn't a troublemaker, but to my family I was invisible. Or worse, I was the convenient scapegoat whenever things went wrong. That night, we were all gathered in the living room. The smell of cinnamon cookies filled the air, Christmas carols played softly, and the tree sparkled with ornaments collected over decades. It should have been perfect. But my family had a way of turning even the most beautiful night into a battlefield. "Rachel," my mom snapped, her voice cutting through the chatter. "Did you really forget to bring the extra chairs from the garage again?" "We don't have enough for everyone now," I froze. I had reminded her earlier in the day that I had work until late afternoon and didn't have time to pick them up. But in my family, excuses didn't matter. Chris smirked from across the room, Emily giggled into her phone, and Dad sighed like I was the biggest disappointment in the world. "I told you, Mom," I said quietly. "I couldn't do it today. I was working a double shift." "Oh, please," Chris said, rolling his eyes. "Working at a coffee shop isn't exactly rocket science. You could have found 10 minutes. The room filled with laughter, my family's laughter. At me, I clenched my fists but stayed silent. That's how it always went. If I fought back, I was too sensitive or causing drama. If I stayed quiet, I was weak. Either way, I couldn't win. By dinner time, things got worse. My mom, clearly annoyed with me, served everyone at the table first. When she finally got to me, there was barely anything left of the mashed potatoes or ham. "Sorry, Rachel," she said flatly, not even looking at me. "You should have sat down faster." I looked around the table. Everyone else had their plates piled high, laughing, drinking wine, enjoying themselves. My stomach churned, not just from hunger but from humiliation. And then came the final blow. "Rachel," Dad said, leaning back in his chair, "since you can't seem to do anything right tonight, why don't you make yourself useful and sleep in the garage? We need the guest room for Aunt Linda." The room went silent. I blinked, thinking maybe I misheard him. "What?" I asked softly. "You heard me," Dad said, his voice firm. "The garage? There's a couch out there." "It's not that bad," Emily giggled again. "Oh my God, Rachel, that's so embarrassing," Chris smirked. "Well, at least she won't snore and keep us up," everyone laughed. Everyone but me. I felt my throat tighten as I stood up from the table. No one stopped me. No one cared. I walked to the garage carrying only the thin blanket I had in my room. The second I opened the door, a wave of freezing air smacked me in the face. The garage was like an icebox, the concrete floor radiating cold that seeped into my bones. I curled up on the dusty couch in the corner, pulling the blanket tightly around me, but it was useless. The cold bit through every layer. My breath came out in white clouds, my fingers numb within minutes. Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I was done crying for these people. As I stared at the cracked ceiling of the garage, a thought came over me. A dangerous, thrilling thought. They think I'm weak. They think I'm disposable. But what they don't know is that I've been building something for years. Something they could never imagine. See, while they mocked me for working at that coffee shop, I wasn't just serving lattes. I was saving. Every tip, every paycheck, every spare dollar. And I wasn't just saving, I was investing. I taught myself about stocks, real estate, and online businesses. I built something behind the scenes, something powerful. And as I lay there shivering on that couch, I made a promise to myself. This would be the last Christmas they'd ever laugh at me. Because soon, they would learn the truth. And when they did, they'd regret every cruel word, every laugh, every time they pushed me aside. I wasn't just the invisible daughter anymore. I was the one who secretly owned something that could change everything. And on that freezing Christmas Eve, while my family drank wine and exchanged gifts in the warmth of the house, I planned my revenge. The night in that freezing garage felt endless. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, the laughter from inside the house echoed in my ears like they were mocking me all over again. I thought about all the Christmases before this one, how I was always the afterthought, the one cleaning up wrapping paper, the one forgotten when it came to gifts, the one blamed when things went wrong, But this Christmas was going to be different. By morning, I had a plan. When I walked back into the house the next day, my hair messy, my face pale from the cold, everyone glanced at me like I was some stray animal. Chris smirked. Emily whispered something behind her phone screen, probably texting her friends about how pathetic her sister was. "Rachel," Mom said flatly, "can you run to the store?" "We're out of milk." I stared at her for a long moment, and then I smiled. For the first time in years, I smiled in front of them. "Sure," I said calmly. I grabbed my coat. But instead of heading to the grocery store, I drove somewhere else. See, what my family didn't know was that for the past 5 years, I had been quietly building my empire. It started small, an online Etsy shop where I sold handmade jewelry. Then I learned digital marketing, grew my business, expanded into real estate rentals, and finally made smart stock investments. By the time I turned 24, I had already crossed 6 figures in savings. At 26, I hit 7 figures. And now, at 29, I wasn't just Rachel the invisible daughter. I was Rachel, the silent millionaire. And here's the part that would shock them the most. The very house they lived in, yes, the one where they banished me to the freezing garage, was legally mine. They didn't know it. But 3 years ago, when my dad lost a big chunk of money in a bad investment, he almost lost the house. Desperate, he refinanced under a quiet deal. I stepped in and bought the property through an LLC I set up. I kept my name off the visible paperwork, but the ownership? It was mine. That morning, while they thought I was buying milk, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, finalizing the last detail of transferring the property deed directly into my own name. By Christmas evening, I returned home. My family was gathered in the living room again, laughing, unwrapping gifts, pretending like nothing had happened. "Rachel," Dad said, glancing up. "You finally got the milk?" I set a thick envelope on the coffee table. "Not exactly," I said softly. Chris frowned. Emily barely looked up from her phone. Mom raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Dad asked. I sat down, my hands steady even though my heart was pounding. "It's the deed to this house." Silence. They all stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "I own it," I said, my voice sharp but calm. "Every wall, every room, every brick. This house doesn't belong to you anymore. It hasn't for years. It belongs to me," Emily laughed nervously. "Okay, sure, Rachel. Like you have that kind of money." I pulled out the official paperwork and slid it across the table. My lawyer's letterhead gleamed at the top, the signatures in black ink undeniable. Their faces changed instantly. Chris's smirk dropped. Mom's jaw went slack. Dad's eyes widened as he grabbed the paper, scanning it in disbelief. This can't be real," Dad stammered. This is impossible." "It's real," I said. "While you all were too busy laughing at me, I was building something. I saved, I invested, I worked harder than any of you could imagine. And when you almost lost this house, guess who stepped in?" "Me," Mom shook her head. No, you're lying." "Check the county records," I said coldly. "It's all there." The silence in the room was thick. For once in my life, they had nothing to say. Then I leaned forward. "Do you remember last night? When you banished me to the freezing garage? When you treated me like trash in my own home? Well, guess what? This isn't your home. It's mine. And I'm done being your punching bag." I stood up, my voice rising. "So here's what's going to happen. You pack your things and leave. Tonight." Chris jumped up, his face red. "You can't do that." I looked him dead in the eye. "I can. And I am." Emily's phone slipped from her hand as tears filled her eyes. "Rachel, you wouldn't—" I cut her off. "Oh, I would. I already called the sheriff's office. They'll be here in an hour to make sure everything goes smoothly." The look on their faces was priceless. Shock, fear, betrayal. The same way I had felt for years every time they humiliated me, mocked me or pushed me aside. For once I wasn't the weak one. For once they were. As I stood there watching them scramble, I felt something I'd never felt before. Power. Not the cruel kind they used against me, but the kind that came from finally standing up for myself. And as the snow fell outside and Christmas lights twinkled in the windows, I realized this was the best gift I could have ever given myself. The gift of freedom. The gift of revenge. And from that night on, I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was the woman who owned it all.